Welcome to part 2 of my extensive review of Echoes of Wisdom. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend going back and watching that before coming back to this one. Or, if you haven't seen this video yet, I also have the full-length video linked in the description as well as part 1. But without further ado, I'm Mr. Z, and this is Zelda Discussions. Let's get into it. The game does a good job of limiting the player's ability to completely cheat sections of the overworld while still giving them freedom. In Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, you can climb on pretty much anything and skip things like trails and specific paths that the developers would have wanted us to go through. Echoes of Wisdom does allow you to walk on top of trees and things that would normally be barriers in games like Link's Awakening or the Oracles. However, your ability to get up onto those high-up locations is limited by how many echoes you're able to cast. This, combined with the player being unable to walk through rifts, allows the developers to give the player an experience that gives them all the freedoms of exploring, but within certain parameters set by them. At the beginning of the game, the rift in Soothorn Forest is huge, cutting off the path to Hyrule Field until you complete the first dungeon. But with your 3 triangles available to you, you can stack beds up to get on top of some trees and walk around up there all that you want. And there are even treasure chests that reward you for exploring. But you still cannot leave the Soothorn region. You can explore as much as you want within the contained area that the developers have set for you, and this is exactly what Zelda has been needing. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom had a heavy emphasis on freedom, which seems good on paper, but there is such thing as too much freedom. Being able to go anywhere and experience the story at any time makes it so that pivotal story scenarios or important locations that are meant for late game are given to you from the get-go. But giving us freedom within contained parameters is great. You still get the satisfaction of finding a secret treasure chest or a new helpful echo, but the exploration doesn't take you away from the narrative or given scenario. Another thing about Echoes of Wisdom is that you don't have every ability or item from the start. You acquire new echoes and abilities throughout the game's progression, which allow you to do more and more in the overworld. However, the water block echo that you learn in Jabul Waters kind of breaks the game when it comes to traversing the overworld. You can stack water blocks on top of each other and swim up them, and the more triangles that you have, the more you can stack up. These can also stick to walls, allowing you to move both vertically and horizontally. And you might be thinking that this is literally just climbing from the last 2 Zelda games. And you're right. You can ascend vertically up a mountain, which can skip important things like caves that you would need to go through. And while you cannot do this in Hebra, Death Mountain allows you to skip the caves that take you up to Goron City. Caves that take you to important locations in Old Zelda were required to go through to get to said location. The Tal mountain range in Link's Awakening had a whole network of caves that the player needed to go through in order to get to both Eagle Tower and Turtle Rock. And this cave network we had to go through was intricate and made the player explore these caves to progress to the dungeon. And taking out necessary caves is one quibble that I have with Echoes of Wisdom's Overworld Traversal. Another source of friction for me is warping. There are way too many warp points in this game. Locations you can warp to, called waypoints, are so close together that you hardly need to walk anywhere. Granted, it isn't nearly as bad as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, with a shrine on every square inch of the map, but there are still far too many in Echoes of Wisdom. This makes the already small-scale world feel even tinier. Link's Awakening has quite a small world, with the entirety of it being just an island. However, it feels bigger than it is because you still have to walk everywhere. There are warp points, yes, but in order to warp, you either need to walk to a warp point or complete a side quest to learn the song that lets you warp at any time. So, While you can fast travel to certain locations, you still have to do most of the actual traveling yourself. Echoes of Wisdom just doesn't have this. Once you've found a waypoint, you can warp there anytime from the start of the game. You don't have to walk to a waypoint to warp, and there's certainly no item that makes warping at any time a possibility. This makes walking around the map a one-time deal. Once you've found a waypoint, there's no incentive to walk back to that location, just warp back. No need for legs. However, although I do have some issues with it, I do love the overworld of this game. As mentioned previously, Echoes of Wisdom was made by Grezzo, the company who remade Link's Awakening, and this game uses the same adorable, toy-like diorama art style from Link's Awakening. This art style is one of my favorites that we have gotten so far, and its use in both of these Grezzo projects is phenomenal. I love seeing how they've taken all the characters and enemies and turned them into little toys. However, this art style, although visually stunning to me, really needs to end with this game. It was a novelty when it was Link's Awakening because we hadn't seen it previously, and it was unique. But then with this game, we've already seen it before, so it's not as novel as it was 6 years ago. So while it is really cool, and with how much I love it, this art style should really be limited to these two games. To me, dungeons are the core of what makes Zelda games special. I love solving puzzles and using my keys to progress through a contained area, something Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom weren't able to accomplish due to their structure. But from its first to its last, Echoes of Wisdom does dungeons right. The game has a return to the classic puzzle box dungeons that were notably absent in the previous two entries. Obtaining keys from various rooms to unlock doors, fighting a mini-boss, and finally obtaining the big key to gain entry to the boss. This return to the foundation of the series has made me love this game even more. The dungeons in this game are simpler than most other Zelda games that have come before, but the game is a sort of introduction of old Zelda for the newer fans who are used to the open-air dungeon's more simple puzzle-solving style. So of course, the dungeons aren't going to be the mind-numbing labyrinths of Oracle of Ages. The dungeons of this game have puzzles that can be solved multiple ways while still limiting us to a set number of solutions. For example, in the Farron Temple, there are crystals that need to be energized with electricity, so we can use any of the electric echoes that we've learned so far to do so. These may be the Buzz Blob, the Electric Keys, or the Electric Wizrobe. All of these have the same elemental effects, but it's up to you to choose which ones to use. The game also has the echoes that you need for a certain dungeon's puzzle within the dungeon itself, so that the game doesn't rely on you to have already found said echo in the overworld previously or in another dungeon. Soothorn Ruins, for example, gives you the Strantula, an echo that shoots a web upwards, allowing you to climb on it. And this echo is used throughout the dungeon and in many others as well. And that echo is the only echo that can let you cross certain gaps, having the player go, "Hey, I remember this." Also, the Lanayru Temple has a puzzle that requires a fire keys, but has one in that same room in case you didn't do Elden Temple first, so that you aren't completely screwed and needing to do a whole nother dungeon before finishing this one. This balance makes me happy because the open-endedness of some puzzles makes me get creative, but it also offers the classic puzzles that have been missing for so long. But Echoes of Wisdom not only has good dungeons, it has a lot of them. There are a total of 8 dungeons in the game, each with their own theming, personality, puzzles, and complexity. This expansion in dungeon quantity is a major step up from the last 2 games. Before them, 8 dungeons was simply a standard of the Zelda series, with some having even more than 8. But Breath of the Wild only had 5, and Tears of the Kingdom only had 6. That was a major disappointment for me, at least, whose value and love of the Zelda series rests strongly on the dungeons. But while Breath of the Wild's divine beasts all look pretty much the same, each of the dungeons in Echoes of Wisdom are very unique, with their own designs and atmosphere. You can actually tell the difference between Soothorn Ruins and Lanayru Temple just based off of looks. But the music for each is phenomenal too. Breath of the Wild went for a more ambient style to the music, so it wasn't the epic atmospheric bangers of songs that the old Zeldas offered, like the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time, or the Stone Tower from Majora's Mask. These older dungeons all have unique themes that are atmospheric, memorable, and go along with the theme of the dungeon, and Echoes of Wisdom is no different. The instruments used in Lanayru Temple's theme make for a cold, icy sounding song. Faron Temple sounds damp and foresty. And Gerudo Sanctum sounds like a mysterious sandy crypt. The music is on par with the thematic music of old era of Zelda before the open-air games came into existence, which is something that needed to happen in my opinion. Music plays such a key role in making a dungeon memorable to me. With Breath of the Wild's ambient soundtrack, it makes the dungeon exploration boring and non-memorable. But Echoes of Wisdom's dungeon themes make for a memorable gameplay experience and a catchy song that I hum to myself throughout my day. I do have some problems with this game's dungeons, however. Remember those pesky waypoints I mentioned earlier? Well, each of the dungeons in the game have waypoints within them, meaning you can warp to the rooms that have them, including the room before the boss. This takes away part of the charm that the old Zelda dungeons had, where you had to use your dungeon map in sync with your own mental map that recognizes which rooms lead to where you need to go. But by having warp zones within the dungeons, it takes away the player's need to figure out where to go on their own. And by having a waypoint in the room right before the boss, that makes this issue even worse. Finding the boss door before you find the boss key in old dungeons would make you backtrack through the dungeon to find the key, then take it back to where you found the door. But if you already went through the challenge of finding the boss door in this game, it's just a matter of warping back to that room after obtaining the boss key without the need of remembering how you got to the room in the first place. So, although I do see how this could take away from the frustration of remembering where you came from for other people, it took away a key aspect of what made Zelda Dungeons special and challenging for me. The game has a return of dungeon items as well, which I am really happy about, though only 3 dungeons actually have a main item: Soothorn Ruins, Gerudo Sanctum, and Eldin Temple. These are the 3 dungeons that have a Dark Link mini-boss in them, each rewarding you with one of Link's items, the sword, bow, and bombs of might. These items each have uses in their dungeons along with others as well. However, there are only 3 dungeon items within the 8 dungeons, and while the sword is useful throughout the entire game, the bow has limited practical use aside from shooting 1 crate in Gerudo Sanctum and being another weapon when fighting monsters. But if you think this is bad, the bombs are even worse. You get the bombs in Eldin Temple, which could either be your 5th, 6th, or 7th dungeon in the entire game, meaning you could receive the bombs in the penultimate dungeon that takes place before the final boss. Not to mention, they are made completely useless due to the fact that you learn the Bombfish Echo in Jabul Waters. Really, the only practical use of the bomb item is breaking these blocks in Eldin Temple, and for fighting Volvagia when he's in the lava. Using your bow and bombs also consumes your energy meter as well, so I have a hard time using my bombs at the cost of my precious energy when I can cast as many bombfish as I want with no repercussions. The bow also isn't very strong unless you upgrade the crap out of it with the might crystals. The bow allows you to do massive damage once you do a charge attack after the first upgrade. The last upgrade just makes the damage even bigger. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that, I just needed to address that here though. But I would much rather use my might crystals for upgrading my sword's damage output and energy gauge, because I just use the sword more. This renders the bow even more trivial. So although I do see that being able to use these two items at any time without consuming energy would trivialize using the sword, it does feel like a kick in the face that these two items don't have much use outside of their respective dungeons. Another big issue I have is that you can cheat the entirety of Jabul Ruins and beat what would be a 20-some minute dungeon in only 2 minutes. Normally, you walk on this ground and it breaks, sending Zelda down to the basement where she's chased by the boss. Then, you have to activate 5 switches that add water to a pool that a geyser shoots, with each section of the dungeon giving you enough water to progress to the next. A very cool dungeon. However, you can just skip that entire floor-breaking bit with a flying tile. Then, you can cast a Crawltula, bind to it, and follow it up the wall. Then, you can go to the room on the right, swim for a little bit, and grab the boss key. Swim back up to the central room, cast another Crawltula, and climb up to the boss door. To some people, this may be super cool being able to beat an entire dungeon in 2 minutes, but for me, that just feels crappy. A small oversight made it possible to not have to do an entire dungeon that they put time into to make. And although I don't personally cheat the dungeon, the fact that I could if I wanted to really frustrates me, and I wish they'd fix it. But overall, I am quite pleased with the dungeons of this game. Part 2 is wrapped up and in the books. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and possibly subscribing if you're interested. If you want to see Part 3, I've linked it in the description as well as on screen. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.